Detroit, Michigan, a city built on engines, steel, and the sweat of working men. On this particular morning, the biggest names in the auto industry had gathered inside a sprawling factory for the unveiling of a brand new luxury prototype, valued at over $2 million. This wasn't just any car, it was a statement of innovation, power, and prestige. Cameras flashed, executives whispered, and engineers stood tall, hoping everything would go perfectly. But fate had other plans. Just as the car was about to be driven across the showroom floor, its engine coughed, sputtered, and went dead. The silence that followed was deafening. Executives exchanged nervous glances while a few investors frowned in disbelief. This was supposed to be their shining moment. And now, in front of everyone, the company's most prized creation had failed. A cluster of highly paid engineers rushed forward. They popped the hood, plugged in diagnostic computers, and whispered among themselves. But the minutes dragged on and the car refused to start. Sweat dripped down one engineer's forehead as the crowd grew restless. At the very back of the room stood Jack Turner, a humble mechanic hired only as extra support staff for the event. Jack wasn't dressed in a suit like the executives. His hands were calloused. His shirt still smelled faintly of oil from the late-night shift he had finished before rushing here. A single father, Jack was used to hard work. Long hours in greasy garages, fixing cars nobody else wanted to touch, just to make sure his little daughter, Emily, never went without. As the factory floor buzzed with panic, Jack quietly observed. He noticed the rhythm of the failed ignition, the faint clicking sound beneath the hood, and the way the fuel line seemed starved. Years of experience had trained his ear and instincts in ways no computer could replicate. Finally, as he watched the company's top engineers argue over software errors, Jack couldn't stand by any longer. He stepped forward, clutching his old, dented toolbox. His voice was calm but firm. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked. Some of the engineers scoffed. "This is a $2 million prototype," one muttered. "Not some rusty pickup." But the CEO, who had been standing silently, raised an eyebrow. There was something steady in Jack's tone that made her nod. "Go ahead," she said. Jack rolled up his sleeves, leaned over the engine, and began to work. His hands moved quickly, confidently, tightening a loose connection here, adjusting a fuel valve there. He used nothing more than a few basic tools that looked out of place against the gleaming body of the futuristic car. Within 5 minutes, he closed the hood, wiped his hands, and looked at the driver. "Try it now," Jack said simply. The driver turned the key. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful, as if nothing had ever been wrong. The crowd gasped. Engineers stared in disbelief. For a moment, the entire factory was frozen, watching the single dad mechanic who had done what no one else could. Jack stepped back, modest as ever. But inside he thought of Emily, his daughter, and smiled. He hadn't just fixed a car. He had proven himself in front of the world. The echo of the engine filled the factory floor, its steady hum drowning out the collective gasp of the crowd. For a long moment nobody moved. The $2 million prototype that moments earlier had seemed like a failed dream now sat gleaming, alive, thanks to one man, a humble mechanic with grease on his shirt and determination in his eyes. All attention shifted as the CEO of the company, Victoria Hayes, began walking across the floor. Known throughout Detroit's auto world as a tough, no-nonsense leader, Victoria's reputation was one of brilliance but also intimidation. She rarely smiled, and when she spoke, her words carried weight. Engineers and executives stepped aside nervously as she approached Jack. Jack wiped his hands on a rag, bracing himself. He half expected a scolding for touching the car without authorization. After all, who was he compared to the engineers in suits and ties? Just a single dad mechanic who usually fixed pickup trucks and minivans in a neighborhood garage. But to his surprise, Victoria stopped right in front of him, her sharp heels clicking against the polished floor. She extended her hand. "You," she said firmly, "just saved this company from humiliation." Jack hesitated, then shook her hand. His palm was rough and grease-stained, but she gripped it with respect. For the first time that day, her face softened into a genuine smile. "None of my top engineers could do what you did in minutes," Victoria continued, raising her voice so the entire factory could hear. "That kind of skill doesn't come from manuals or computer diagnostics. It comes from instinct, experience, and heart. And today you proved you have all three." The room erupted in applause. Workers clapped, executives nodded. Even the skeptical engineers who had mocked him earlier looked impressed, some even ashamed. Jack stood there a little embarrassed by the attention but also deeply proud. Then came the moment that truly shocked everyone. Victoria turned back to him and said, "I want you on my team." Effective immediately, Jack blinked. "Ma'am, I'm just a small-town mechanic." She raised a hand to stop him. "No, you're an asset. I'm offering you a position as lead technical advisor for our prototype division. Full salary, benefits, and education support for your daughter if you accept." The crowd gasped again, this time louder. Jack felt his chest tighten. He thought of Emily, his little girl waiting for him at home, coloring pictures at their worn kitchen table, always asking why he worked such long hours. This opportunity wasn't just a job. It was security, stability, and a chance to give her the life she deserved. With tears threatening to fall, Jack nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Hayes, I won't let you down." Victoria placed a hand on his shoulder. "Something tells me you won't." As the applause thundered once more, Jack realized this was more than a professional victory. It was a triumph of resilience, love, and hope. A single dad who had spent years fighting for every dollar, every meal, every ounce of dignity, had finally been recognized. That evening, when Jack returned home, Emily ran into his arms. He hugged her tightly and whispered, "Everything's about to change, sweetheart. Daddy fixed one car today, and it fixed our whole future." And with that, the story of a single dad mechanic in Detroit became more than a factory tale. It became a reminder that sometimes the greatest miracles happen when grit meets opportunity, and when love drives every decision.